Welcome back to our Business Chat segment. My name is Abi Agina. Today we'll be talking about the recently launched foreign and diaspora policy. And joining me in studio is Dr.Shem, who is the president of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. And Dr. Shem, just Tuesday this week, the government launched this particular policy.
Right.
You've dealt a lot with people working abroad. What does this particular policy mean for the people? What are the gains in it?
I think it's very commendable that we at last got the Kenya Diaspora policy. Some of us have been involved on this from the early 90s while a student in the US and the UK. We're very happy that after that time we now have a diaspora policy. It captures, it may not be perfect, I should say, because we would have wanted to see more diaspora participation and input.
Yeah.
But we also recognize that time was a limitation. But it provides for engagement with the diaspora. It provides for an institutional framework within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. And it provides for involvement of diaspora in sport and culture, tourism, and as well as diaspora diplomacy, because our people being based out there understand those environments pretty well, and we're happy about it.
And why is it important to engage the diaspora at this time, looking at how we've been seeing diaspora remittances being on the high?
Yes, I think it's quite commendable. The remittance is one thing that's known. Central Bank puts it at $1.4 billion every year. The World Bank puts it double, about $2 billion a year. That means about 2 trillion Kenya shillings, almost the equivalent to our annual national budget. But this could be much more. But remittance is just one of the things. Investments are another. And as well as skills and knowledge transfer, which diaspora can bring on board. And we are hoping as government works towards implementing this policy, which we hope will be through a PPP arrangement with a fourth P, public-private people's partnership, so that diaspora organizations like ours are involved as well, not to mention the corporate world. So we're looking forward. We think there's an awful lot of things that Kenya Diaspora can do in terms of investments. Even one of our biggest projects, the LAPSET, which is a $20 billion project. We believe that with the right policy now in place and with incentives to the diaspora could finance a significant part of that budget.
Take us through the nitty-gritty of this policy, because a lot of people who are watching us are wondering, now the policy is out there, how can I immediately start to benefit from this policy for Kenyans working abroad in the US, in Canada, in Germany, name the various countries as well? Sure,
we literally have Kenyans everywhere, in every corner of the world. But they're still Kenyan. Many of them are still emotionally attached to their country. In terms of, there are the two policies, as you correctly say. First was the foreign policy, which addresses about 5 different pillars in terms of economic diplomacy, in terms of social diplomacy, diaspora diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, and environmental diplomacy. So there are those various aspects. But let me talk particularly about the diaspora diplomacy part. In terms of the diaspora policy, we recognize that there are a variety of diaspora. Actually, Kenya Diaspora Alliance has adopted a very broad definition of diaspora to not only include the non-residents, that's Kenyans who live outside the country ordinarily, but also returnees, as well as those of mixed families, Kenyans married to Norwegians and to Ugandans and so on and so forth, because there's that diversity. They tend to have some unique problems. But we would have loved to see maybe a little more than what there is in the policy, and this is why I say it's not perfect. One of the areas where much more would have been done is in the area of civic education. A number of our diaspora are misconceived. They tend to look down upon our counterparts back home, and vice versa. There are people who believe those who go outside the country are only dishwashers. And there's nothing wrong with washing dishes. But at the end of the day, we are all Kenyans. And this is where we need to do civic education so that we recognize the reciprocity between the Kenyans outside the country and the Kenyans at home. There is the aspect of participation in electing leadership in this country. Incidentally, just 2 days after the launch of the policy, on Thursday, yesterday, IBC went back to court, Supreme Court actually, to appeal a ruling late last year by the Court of Appeal that directed it to start immediately registering diaspora. This is quite ironical because on the one hand, government at the executive level highest in the executive, even the judiciary, as well as the legislature, are saying diaspora are going to vote in 2017. And IBC, in giving its report, the leadership declared as much, that they're working on registering diaspora. So it defeats all logic why they're back to court to challenge that. Anyway, the court is coming up in 2 weeks' time. We are hoping that diaspora will be made feel wanted, so that much more remittances, much more investments, much more knowledge transfer can come back. In addition, diaspora could contribute towards promoting sport, promotion of sport by mainstreaming diaspora. For example, when we have Boston Marathon, next month there's the Vegas Sevens, the rugby Sevens taking place in Las Vegas. That's where you normally find the highest number of Kenyans in the US. About 15,000 Kenyans will be there. If with the kind of policy we now have in place, once we have a mechanism for collaboration, we're likely to see much more Kenyan engagement and involvement in promotion of sport across the world.
Shifting gears a bit, Kenya recently signed as well a deal with the United Arab Emirates to have 100,000 workers to go and work in the UAE. One of the biggest challenges for people working abroad is what can they invest in back home? Does this policy address that?
Yes, I think it's commendable, Abi, that government has signed this agreement with UAE. Employment, job opportunity is one of the major challenges to our young people. And as KDA, we're very happy about that. In fact, we have a proposal we've tabled to the previous leadership in the Ministry of Labor on identifying, we call it foreign labor or labor export, identifying opportunities abroad, working with government, the relevant ministries, together with the recruitment agencies back here, identifying the suitable candidates, preparing them. And when they go out there, they find the seniors, our members, who are already literally in every part of the world, including the Middle East, where this is going to happen. We're hoping that this is something that can be improved for their betterment. But in addition, in terms of investment, and this is where there's still some loopholes in the policy, there are hardly any incentives for investing back home. Example, what happens in Ethiopia? For example, if diaspora invest in real estate, government covers 70%. They could go into a bank and 70% of the collateral is covered by government. The idea is to incentivize them to come back and invest home. There are other similar examples. China, for example, if you go out as diaspora and run a successful small to medium enterprise, after 2 years, if it's a small one, you could get a grant of $50,000 automatic from the Chinese government. The idea here is to encourage people to go out, succeed, and then, of course, repatriate back the profits that you make. So these incentives is one area where we are hoping a little more will be done.
And just before I let you go, one last question. I know we are running out of time. You've been following up on the issue of the digital migration, and you come from a technology background. In just under 30 seconds, what would you make of the recent developments?
The Kenya Diaspora Alliance would want to register its solidarity with the media houses. It's a bit unfortunate the way the Communications Authority of Kenya has handled this matter. We believe they can do better. In fact, the case is comparable to what you find in the Nairobi Securities Exchange, where about 70% of the wealth is foreign owned, and you still find some people in government saying nothing is wrong with that.
Allow me to cut you short. It's a very touchy subject, as you've rightly put it, and we'll be keeping an eye on that.